Hey everyone, I'm a 33-year-old guy and I've been married to my wife, let's call her Mindy, who's 30 for about 3 years now. We actually met through some mutual friends a few years back, and after dating for nearly 4 years, we decided to tie the knot. Mindy and I hit it off right away, partly because we had so much in common. One big thing being that we both worked as bankers. But after we got married, she left her job to help her friend launch a new business. She had saved up enough money to take that leap, and I told her I'd back her up. And I did. She'd always dreamed of owning her own business, especially since her parents were entrepreneurs too, though they never really found much success. They ran a small makeup and beauty shop that mostly catered to the local crowd, but Mindy had bigger plans, and I stood by her all the way. Now, I come from a business-oriented family too, though to be honest, I never really had a passion for it. My parents were wealthy and I grew up with a lot of privileges. My grandfather started a bakery business ages ago, and then my dad took it to the next level. Once he took over, it became a pretty big deal under his leadership. The business is still thriving today, but it's going to be passed on to my older brother, not me. And I'm totally fine with that. I've never had the desire to run it. I'm happy where I am in my career and plan to stay the course. Sadly, both of my parents passed away recently. My dad had been dealing with serious heart problems for years, and he eventually died from cardiac arrest. My mom had already passed during the pandemic, so it was a pretty rough period for all of us. Mindy was really supportive through all of it, and I was thankful to have someone like her by my side during such a hard time. After my dad passed, my brother and I had to handle all their affairs. It hit us suddenly and we weren't fully prepared. He's a couple of years older than me, and while we were meeting with our parents' lawyer, we learned something unusual. Apparently, our parents had set up their wills in a way that nothing would be revealed until both of them had passed away. Their lawyer said he was finally allowed to disclose everything. I actually thought that was a clever setup, kind of like something out of a movie. But Mindy didn't see it that way. She thought it was weird and unnecessary, even called it diabolical. The thing was, not only did we have to wait for both of them to pass, but there was also a clause saying the wills couldn't be read until the probate process was officially complete. And both my brother and I had to be in the same room when it happened. Honestly, I thought it was kind of fun, like I was part of some secret family mystery. But again, Mindy wasn't enjoying it. That didn't surprise me though. She'd never really been fond of my parents. She said they made her feel uneasy, like they were constantly judging her. I personally never got that impression, and I tried to reassure her many times, but she never seemed convinced. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, my brother and I finally sat down for the official reading of the wills. Turns out our parents decided to split everything between us pretty evenly. My brother was given full ownership of the bakery, which made sense because he'd been the one taking care of it ever since our dad's health started declining. I, on the other hand, was left with their house. Actually, more like a massive estate where I grew up. It's worth a lot, and I was genuinely touched that they left it to me. Aside from that, whatever money they had was to be divided equally, and any additional properties not specifically mentioned were to be sold, with the proceeds going to charity. My brother and I were both fine with how everything was handled. Honestly, I thought our parents had been more than fair. But Mindy? Not so much. She thought I should have gotten a share of the business too, and even brought up the idea of the two of us running it as a team. That just wasn't realistic though. I had no desire to be involved in the bakery. I liked my job, I was well paid, and I had a solid position. Besides, my brother had actually invested time and effort into the company. He understood it inside and out. And I didn't think it would have been right for me to step in and take a piece of it. He earned it and I respected that. I've always admired how sharp he is when it comes to business. In fact, I think he's got the potential to take it even further than my dad ever did. I'm proud of him. We've always had a close bond, and I know if I ever found myself in a tough spot, he'd have my back without hesitation. Still, Mindy didn't seem to be okay with any of it. At least, not until she found out that I was inheriting the mansion. Once she realized how valuable that property was, she calmed down a bit. The house had been in the family for generations. My great-grandfather on my mother's side built it ages ago. My mom's family had money too. I think they came from some kind of aristocratic background, though I don't know the exact details. I just know they were well off, and her dad was one of the top lawyers of his time. That wealth got passed down, and her side of the family managed it pretty well over the years. Now, it's worth pointing out that even with all that inherited wealth, my parents worked hard their entire lives. Sure, they had advantages, but they never looked down on people who didn't, and they raised me to treat everyone with respect, no matter their financial situation. Anyway, the moment Mindy heard about the estate, she immediately started pushing for us to sell it, and use the money to go on a luxury vacation. Honestly, It felt kind of silly to me because, truth be told, we could afford a vacation without selling anything. But Mindy wasn't after your typical week-long trip to the beach or some cozy getaway in the mountains. No, she had something much bigger in mind. She wanted us to both quit our jobs entirely and take off for several months to travel the world. According to her, the only way we could really do a proper world tour was if we weren't tied down to work schedules or desk jobs. Her plan? Sell the estate my parents left me, use the money to fund this months-long adventure, and then come back and figure things out later. Maybe find new jobs when we got back. I thought the whole idea was nuts. Not only did it sound completely unrealistic, but I had zero interest in giving up the job I loved. I genuinely enjoy the work I do and I like the people I work with. I've got a good thing going and I wasn't about to walk away from that. Now Mindy, on the other hand, has always had a hard time sticking to a job. I can't say I blame her entirely though. She joined her friend's startup after quitting the bank, and while they were trying their best, the business wasn't exactly booming. My wife handled the financial side of things and she was constantly venting to me about how tough it was to figure out how to scale up and actually start turning real profits. They were making some money, sure, but nowhere near what she used to earn at the bank, and that really got under her skin. I admired her for pouring so much time and effort into something she believed in, but at the same time I was starting to get frustrated. I could understand her stress, I really could, but I wasn't going to throw away my own career just because hers wasn't going the way she hoped. I didn't think it was right for her to expect me to give up everything just so she could chase this idea of a global escape. So I finally put my foot down. I told her plain and simple, I wasn't selling the house. And honestly, more than not wanting to fund a 6-month vacation, I didn't want to part with my childhood home. That place holds a ton of memories for me. It meant something. I didn't think it was fair for her to ask me to give it up for something so fleeting. Well, that did not go over well. Mindy got really upset. Furious, actually. She started calling me selfish and said she should have known better than to expect anything different from me. She accused me of acting just like my parents, looking down on her and treating her as less than. According to her, she wasn't asking for much. But from where I was standing, she was asking for a whole lot. It hurt to hear her say those things, especially the part where she called me selfish just because I wanted to keep doing the work I enjoy and hold on to a house that meant so much to me. I told her she was being unreasonable. That only made things worse. She absolutely blew up. It turned into the biggest, ugliest fight we've ever had. We said some really harsh things to each other, stuff that neither of us should have said just out of anger. Eventually she packed up her things and stormed out. Said she was going to stay with her parents and wouldn't be coming back until I changed my mind. At that point it wasn't even about the trip anymore. She said it was about the principle. She claimed I never made sacrifices for her or prioritized our relationship, and she was tired of it. Honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. It felt like she was just throwing things at the wall, trying to guilt me into caving. I even asked her to give me one example of when I'd supposedly treated her that way. She couldn't name a single one. It was like the whole fight was just built on resentment and frustration. I really do regret how bad things got. I love my wife and I want her to come back. But some of the things she said that day, they were just cruel. She made me feel like I was the bad guy, simply because I didn't want to walk away from a career I care about. And she didn't stop there. She dragged my parents into it too, saying they always looked down on her and treated her like she didn't belong because she wasn't from a wealthy background. And that hit me. Losing my parents was hard enough. Hearing Mindy talk about them like that felt like a low blow. Maybe I was being sensitive, but to me it's in really poor taste to badmouth the dead, especially people who aren't here to defend themselves. And honestly, I had no idea where all of this was coming from. As far as I knew, my parents had always been polite and respectful toward her. They never judged people based on money or status, and they sure as hell didn't raise me to think like that. Anyone who truly knew them would tell you the same. Between that, her attacking my parents, calling me selfish, and making me feel like I was somehow failing her over something that wasn't even fair to begin with, I decided I wouldn't be the one to reach out first. If she wanted to talk, she'd have to make the move. I didn't tell anyone about our fight, not even my brother. Looking back, that might have been a mistake. A few days ago, my brother tried to call me while I was stuck in a meeting. He had something important to discuss, and since he couldn't get a hold of me, he called Mindy instead. He had no clue we were in the middle of this blow-up. What he wanted to tell me was actually pretty interesting. A while back, I'd asked him to check on how much the estate might be worth, just in case I ever did consider selling. He's got a couple of buddies in real estate and he'd reached out to them for some numbers. Turns out, the estimate I had in mind was way off. The place is actually worth nearly twice what I thought. Apparently, the style of the house, its architecture, is super desirable right now. Buyers would be lining up for a shot at it. One of his realtor friends even said he knew a guy who specialized in buying old properties like mine and turning them into stunning high-end heirlooms. That idea really got me thinking. If I ever wanted to monetize the house, that would let me keep some ownership and still earn from it. It seemed way smarter than just selling it off completely. Unfortunately, my brother had already shared all of that with Mindy. He just assumed everything was fine between us and figured she'd be happy to hear the good news. When I finally wrapped up my meeting and called him back, he told me the same thing about the property value, and I was totally on board. But then he mentioned something that caught me off guard. Mindy had seemed excited about it. That didn't sit right with me. So I asked him what he meant. That's when he told me he'd spoken to her first. Since I hadn't been answering my phone, he figured it was urgent enough to share right away, and since he couldn't get through to me, he thought calling Mindy made sense. The moment he said that, I started feeling uneasy. So I finally told him the truth. I told him Mindy and I had a huge fight a few days earlier. That she'd actually moved out and was staying with her parents. So her being happy about this? Yeah, that wasn't comforting to me. Still, I didn't want to get sidetracked. I told my brother to go ahead and connect me with his realtor friend. I'd deal with the Mindy situation later. Now that she knew what was going on, I wasn't sure what she was going to do next. Deep down, I was hoping she'd reach out and apologize. Not just to me but also for the awful things she'd said about my parents. And she did reach out. That same evening. Though, not in the way I'd expected. She called and said she wanted to talk. Her voice sounded low. Serious. Almost like she was remorseful. For a second, I actually thought she was going to say she was sorry for how she acted during the fight, for the nasty comments. Especially about my folks. I really believed she was going to own up to it. But instead, she jumped right into saying she'd heard everything from my brother, and she wanted to come home so we could have a proper discussion about what had happened. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd said. Just a request to talk things out. I know it might sound petty, but I honestly felt like she owed me an apology. So I asked her directly. I asked if she didn't have anything else to say. If she wasn't going to apologize for what she'd said to me, and about my parents. And that's when she hit me with something I didn't expect. She told me she wasn't sorry. She said those things had been simmering inside her for a long time, and that the fight just brought it all to the surface. According to her, she'd always felt like an outsider in my family. Like she never really belonged. All because of where she came from. She said maybe part of it was her own insecurity, but she also claimed our behavior didn't help. She felt like we were constantly showing off how wealthy we were, like we were reminding her how different she was from us. I'll be honest, I thought that was ridiculous. We've never acted that way. Not ever. That was all in her head. And I told her that. What would I possibly gain from rubbing my financial background in my own wife's face? That made no sense. I was getting really fed up with her always painting herself as the victim. My parents were nothing but kind to her since the day we got married. And the fact that she was now twisting things around to make them look like villains? That really got under my skin. I told her straight up that I didn't want to keep talking to her unless she could admit that she messed up. But she stood her ground. Said she wasn't going to do that. And in the heat of the moment, I just snapped. I told her that if she couldn't take responsibility for what she said and how she acted, then there was no point in us having another conversation. I said I was going to file for divorce. And that she should probably start looking for a lawyer. Then I hung up. I think that's what finally scared her, because ever since that call she's been blowing up my phone. Calling, texting, begging me to change my mind. She keeps saying I'm making too big a deal out of all this, that I'm overreacting, that I'm blowing it out of proportion. But even now, after all those messages, she still hasn't apologized. She's begging me to talk to her, asking me to meet in person so she can explain everything. But the way I see it, I don't owe her that, not unless she can acknowledge how wrong she was. Especially for the things she said about my family. My parents are gone. They can't defend themselves. And I think it's absolutely disgusting for her to talk about them like that, trying to shift blame onto them just to justify her own behavior. That's not okay. I ended up talking to my brother about the whole situation and he agreed with me. He thinks I should hold off on responding to her until she takes accountability. She's still been texting nonstop. But I haven't answered. I mean, what do you even say to someone who refuses to admit they were out of line? She keeps insisting that if we just sat down and talked, I'd understand her side, and maybe even forgive her. But I've got no interest in a heart-to-heart until she can say just 2 words, I'm sorry. At this point, I'm just emotionally drained. I told her clearly last night, I wasn't going to talk to her or meet up until she apologized. And that was final. I even gave her a deadline. 3 days. If she can't figure it out by then, I'll move forward with the divorce. I can't live in this limbo forever. I still love her. I truly do. But love doesn't mean letting someone disrespect you, or your family, again and again without consequence. I can understand if she has her own baggage to sort through, but that doesn't give her a free pass to trash my parents or twist things to make herself the victim. When we last spoke, Mindy accused me of being unfair. She said I was acting selfish, that because I now had this massive inheritance I was choosing wealth over our marriage. She claimed she couldn't be okay with that. I didn't even fully understand what she was trying to imply, but the suggestion that I was putting money ahead of my relationship didn't sit right with me. That's not who I am. Even now, after everything she said, I've still been trying to hold on, trying to find some way to fix things. I've been giving her space to make things right, because deep down I really do want this marriage to work. But it feels more and more like I'm the only one who cares whether it survives or not. She just wants things to go her way, and it doesn't seem to matter to her that she's in no position to call the shots like that. Lately I've just been feeling completely drained. Trapped even. I talked to my brother about all of it, and he thinks it's time I move on and file for divorce. Honestly, he's probably right. This whole situation has spiraled out of control. But before I made a final decision, I wanted a second opinion, just for my own peace of mind. I take my relationship seriously, and breaking up a marriage is a huge deal to me. I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something I'd regret. So, am I the bad guy for wanting a divorce just because my wife pushed me to sell my childhood home, quit our jobs, and take off for 6 months? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I first posted this, and a few days ago I finally went ahead and filed for divorce. Last week, after non-stop texts and pressure from Mindy, I agreed to meet her in person. She'd been persistent, and I figured it was time to have one last conversation and just be done with it. But by the time I met her, I'd already moved on in my head. I wasn't emotionally invested anymore. I think I just needed to be sure I was making the right call. And reading everyone's comments really helped solidify that decision. We met at a restaurant instead of our home. I wanted a neutral environment, somewhere she wouldn't feel comfortable making a scene. Seeing her again after all that time was awkward. I honestly wanted to walk out the minute I saw her. But I stayed. I wish I could say something changed during that conversation. That she said something new. That she showed some real understanding. But she didn't. She repeated the same thing she'd said before. She told me again that, even if my parents hadn't explicitly treated her badly, she still felt like they didn't respect her because she didn't come from a wealthy background. At that point, even she had to know it was all in her head. She was just clinging to this narrative that made it easier to shift the blame onto someone else. Usually my parents. I told her to stop. But she said she couldn't help it. That her brain just worked that way, and I needed to understand that. Look, I do understand what it's like to have internal struggles. And I respect that she's aware of her issues. But I also know I can't let her trample over me and keep excusing it just because she has problems. Then she told me again, that by choosing to keep the house my parents left me, I was putting that stupid house above her. She said it felt like I was telling her she wasn't worth it. That's when I finally said what I'd been holding back. That it was an unfair and flat-out stupid comparison. I told her I was done with her constantly twisting things to make me look like the bad guy. I wasn't going to keep defending my decision to keep a home filled with memories, or to stay in a job I actually liked, just because she was unhappy with her own choices. I'd had enough. I told her straight, I was filing for divorce. I didn't want to be married to her anymore. She seemed shocked at first. But to her credit, she didn't make a scene. She said she respected my decision, even though this wasn't how she wanted things to end. But she agreed, things had gotten too messy for reconciliation. And that was it. We haven't spoken since. And she blocked me on everything. Not that I didn't see that coming. I filed the papers. And in a couple of months, everything will be finalized. Thankfully, we had a prenup, so the legal process is relatively simple. Still, I know the emotional part won't be. I'm already trying to mentally prepare for it. I started packing away everything that reminds me of her. Anything we bought together. Anything that brings back memories. I just want the house to feel like my space again. The divorce is hard enough without constantly running into reminders of what used to be. Does this story resonate with you? Let us know in the comments. Remember, love should never come at the cost of your self-respect. Like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories.